Welcome, readers. Today on Book Chat, we are discussing the final book in our fantasy read-along, Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. Stay tuned. Today's episode is sponsored by romance title A Passionate Love, written by Delaney Diamond. Simone Brooks and Cameron Bennett should not be together. She is a wealthy socialite looking for a suitable husband, a man with the right pedigree and an economic status to match her own. He's a part owner of the hottest nightclub in Atlanta with his siblings, someone who loves cooking, the outdoors, and women, not necessarily in that order. After one night together, their sizzling chemistry makes it difficult to stay away. Then comes the hard part, navigating their differences to salvage a relationship that, while it may be imperfect, it overflows with love and passion. A Passionate Love is available now. Go ahead and pick up your copy wherever books and audiobooks are sold. Hear the audiobook sample on shelfaddiction.com or by visiting DelaneyDiamond.com to learn more. Links are in the show notes. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Tamara Ford, and welcome to Book Chat here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. Participate in this book discussion by joining the Facebook group Shelf Addiction Official. Talk about the series with us there, as well as other bookish topics. I hope to hear your thoughts on this book discussion. As always, you can find the three of us on Twitter and Instagram. The links for everything are below in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please support this podcast by sharing it with some book nerd friends or on your favorite social media space. That would really help me out, and I appreciate you for doing so. The uncut video version of this podcast is available now on Patreon. Join us there for exclusive videos, including this podcast after show. We get even more candid with what we have to say. So if you're interested in that at all, you'll need to come on over to Patreon and sign up. Before we get started, I have to issue a spoiler warning. This is a roundtable book discussion, so nothing is off limits. You've been warned. Welcome back to another 3-book blogger, 1 series read-along discussion. Today we are talking about the third book in the trilogy, and that book is Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. Joining me are my 3 bloggers, 1 series read-along co-hosts, Casey and Nicola. Welcome back, ladies.
Hello.
Always a pleasure.
Always.
Before we get going, Casey, please run down the book stats.
Okay, Dreams of Gods and Monsters is the third and final book in the series by Laini Taylor. It was published in April 2014 by Little Brown Books for young readers, and it is 613 pages long. The audiobook was narrated by Christine Havam and is 18 hours and 8 minutes long.
18 hours.
18
That's
hours.
long.
That's long.
And those 8 minutes, too. Don't forget
Right.
Those last 8 minutes, man. Nicola, why don't you hit us with the synopsis?
All right. 2 worlds threaten to crumble in the face of a common enemy in the epic conclusion to the New York Times bestselling Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, now with a gorgeous new package. What power can bruise the sky? 2 worlds are poised on the brink of a vicious war. By way of a staggering deception, Karoo has taken control of the Chimera's rebellion and is intent on steering its course away from dead-end vengeance. The future rests on her. When the brutal Angel Emperor brings his army to the human world, Karoo and Akiva are finally reunited, not in love, but in tentative alliance against their common enemy. It is a twisted version of their long-ago dream, and they begin to hope that it might forge a way forward for their people, and perhaps for themselves. But with bigger threats on the horizon, are Karoo and Akiva strong enough to stand among the gods and monsters? The New York Times bestselling Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy comes to a stunning conclusion as, from the streets of Rome to the caves of the Kirin and beyond, humans, chimera, and seraphim strive, love, and die in an epic theater that transcends good and evil, right and wrong, friend and enemy.
All right.
Yay!
Okay, so if you want to talk with any of us about this book further, you can find us on social media. You know the places. The links are in the show notes. You can also find us in the Facebook group, Shelf Addiction Official. And of course, for you, those of you listening, if you're interested in today's after show, it is available right now on Patreon. So you'll have to scoot on over there and sign up. So let's get this convo going. Okay.
613 pages.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so before we get into all the juicy details, I do want to give a disclaimer, guys. I'm going to do it. As you know, this is my second time reading this trilogy, and for some reason, this third book was really hard for me. It was very difficult, and that is polar opposite to how I felt the first time around. So you're going to hear some different things coming out of my mouth probably than expected, because if you see my Goodreads rating from before, this won't match that.
I am literally in the exact same boat. This is my second read through, and I think the first time I gave it a 5-star, and this time I am not giving it 5 stars, and I'm very sad about that.
Yeah.
It sucks when something that you love just doesn't really hold up to a second read. That's I'm the one who hasn't read it before. I'm the one who doesn't typically read young adult, and I didn't love the second book, and I didn't love this book, and I'm not having any previous good experiences shattered, so I win.
And you are winning, because shattered would be the right word. Shattered is right.
Yes. I loved this series the first time I read it. I think I sat down and read all 3 books in a week, or maybe a weekend. I read all of them back to back to back to back, and just all at once. And it was amazing. And I wanted more of this world, and everything was so beautiful and lush and detailed. And this week I was like, I just don't want to read. I cannot make myself read. And I don't know if it's 2020 just killing me, or if it's this book. But I got to maybe 40% and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I started skimming. I'd read a couple paragraphs on a page and then skip 2 pages and kind of follow along with what was being said and then skip another page. I could not do it. And I don't know if it's 2020 killing me, because I'm like, oh yeah, angels coming out of the sky, suicide pacts, everybody in the world rioting. Sure, let's read more of that.
I mean, honestly, it could be some of that, or it could just be that, you're older than you were the first time you read it.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely, for me, I'm a lot older than I was when I first read it. And
10 years matters in what you like to read,
Oh yeah,
so.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that I had such grandiose, I guess, feelings about this, how I felt about it before. When I started reading this, I'm like, I didn't remember that or this or that. And I'm like, wow, did I just kind of just make up what I thought the story was in my head? You know what I mean? I really didn't. I just did not remember a lot of these things that were going on in this last installment. And I just was like, I definitely don't remember the feeling of, wow, this is really, really dragged out. Do we really need all of this? I feel bad for saying that, because I loved it so much the first time around.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars last time. And right now I'm like, this might be a 2-star book. And it's just because I can't read it. I skimmed it. I'm so sorry, but I couldn't do it.
Honestly, I haven't skimmed a book in I don't know how long. It's been a really long time. And for you guys that listen to me on the podcast regularly, especially with the buddy reads, I'm down for the details. I be trying to hammer out the details. So I want to know all the things. So that's not normal for me to skim a book. And I haven't done it in so long. But for me to actually just cave and skim the last part of the book, I'm like, that says a lot to me. Because that's not my normal activity,
Detail oriented. I want all the words.
I read all of it. All of it. All 613 pages. I don't know if I am.
If I could give you a gold star or something, I would.
High five through the Zoom.
Yeah, high five.
Well, yeah. So what we're dancing around is that the story was slow.
It was so slow.
There was, it could have used a pretty draconian editor. There were storylines that meandered a lot. There were long descriptive emotional passages. In particular, there was one scene that I was just going, come on, because like there was a thread where Laraz was getting beaten to shit in another part of the cave, and then we just like put that on hold, and we went to have like a tender moment between Akiva and what's her name? Karu. Yeah. So, and like all I kept thinking was like, I want to get back to the other thing, you know. So I want to know I just couldn't. I couldn't get invested in their moment because, and that's a common thing where you kind of switch back and forth from one thread to another, but the level of intensity didn't match. So I just really wanted to, it was annoying to me. That was one real specific example, but there are scenes where there's just pages and pages of yearning looks and longing and self-recrimination, and like the whole thing about how Akiva was jealous of Thiago/Siri got very tedious for me. And so, yeah.
I think it was around the 50% mark is when Karu told him. So he wasn't jealous after that, but up until then, he was
that's 400 pages. It was.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a whole book for a normal book. But it was this book more than the other ones seemed really teenagery to me, really YA angsty. Maybe I could get my friend to tell him that I like him, or ask his friend if I'm going to ask my friend to ask his friend if he likes me. I mean, that didn't happen, but it was the feeling that I had for a lot of it was, you know, I'm not going to tell him because
I knew they had like a lot of like, oh, we didn't kiss, we can't kiss, because
the whole thing about kissing was annoying me to death. I'm like, you know, she's talking about, oh, cake later. And, you know, that whole, I think that was like off of that whole thing back, I don't know, 10 years ago. When people used to say, oh, you're caked up with somebody or something. Remember when people used to say that? Yes.
No, I don't
like,
remember.
why y'all caking? And like, what do you mean
like
caking?
The wish thing.
Well, I mean, I was kind of sick of her, like,
a reference.
Yeah. But I was just sick of her talking about this kiss that never happened or was so close and didn't happen. And I'm like, oh my God.
Do we want to skip to the end? That was the thing that annoyed me the most. Is like when they finally resolve.
Go right ahead. Skip.
When they finally resolve this war that they've been talking about for 3 books and then some, then they have this whole other thing just plopped on top with the Stelians and the other universe of other monsters. And I was just like, no.
The war doesn't end. Yeah, it's just
I mean, I get why. I you know, in retrospect, I can see if they hadn't done that, Casey would be screaming about plot holes, because there were like little whispers of it through particularly the last 2 books, but there was so much, and it was just, you know, it really felt, and I don't know, I know she's written other books since, but it really felt like a setup for another trilogy.
That didn't happen.
Definitely.
That I don't think happened, which is fine, but it was too drawn out. And like, I don't think they should have made Akiva go back there. I think they could have left someone with him to tutor him or to keep him restrained or so. I mean, there's quicker ways to create that ending, you know, and it just was so drawn out on top of the rest of the book that was so drawn out.
Yeah, and then of course we've got the myths of, you know, and the whole God stars thing, and they're like the prophecy, you know, there's just a lot that that the author didn't need to add.
Yes. It was not integrated with the rest of the story, and it was too much. I mean, if it had just been kind of a touch, okay, but it was really heavy and really a lot at the end.
That reveal was kind of dumb to me too. So like, you know, Karu shows up where, you know, Akiva is, and the grandmother shares the knowledge with her. And then all of a sudden, you know, oh, he has to come because of this. And then all of a sudden, Liza or whatever her name is, she's like, oh, but wait.
I got this.
But wait, yes. This is what I'm supposed to be. And this is how I'm supposed to. I'm like, oh my God. No.
I was
At least she had a purpose.
Yes.
Other than being a prophet. Like if she hadn't said that right then at the very end, her whole plot line in the book would have been overkill. So
I really disliked most of her entire plot line. I did like seeing her come into her best self. I thought that was a great wish.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys skimmed over that part, but
I did read that line.
There was a point where Susanna and Mick found a stash of wishes, and
fake grandma.
Yeah, fake grandma, bad grandma is bad. Bad grandma is bad. Nazi grandma is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And but anyway, they found this big batch of wishes, and at the same time, they were trying to take care of Eliza, who was having a psychotic break. I think would probably be the right way to phrase that in Western terms. She was just kind of talking in tongues and babbling and not able to be not at all herself. And so they made a wish for her, and they talked a lot about like fairy tale wishes and how you have to phrase them very carefully. And the wish they made for her was really carefully crafted. And at the end, they said, we wish for you to be your best self, mm-hmm. which I think is a really a wonderful frame. It's something, a good takeaway from the book. But at that point, she was able to synthesize all of these things in her brain that were not meant for human physiology, and she really became the incarnation of her ancestor, Elazael.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Something like that. And so she really became the incarnation of her seraphim ancestor, and was able to remember everything and to understand everything, and to, it really is sort of a minor god kind of person.
Yeah, which she goes from human to seraphim too.
Mm-hmm. But her whole storyline up to that point, I was very frustrated with. I didn't like it. I didn't see how she fit into anything. Her nemesis back at the office was just flat and boring and just bad for the sake of being bad. Like the villains in this thing are really flat. In the whole book, every villain is just bad because they're bad. They're just bad. There's bad people, bad seraphim, bad chimera. They're just bad, with no dimension to them. So, and Morgan Toth was probably the worst because he had so little else to do other than fuck up her life. He had a very tiny role, and he did it just to be a jerk. Yeah. And I just, I felt like there could have been, I don't know. I just, up until, even once she came into herself, I liked that scene, but even at that point, I still didn't really see how she was going to have an important role in the story. So
it was kind of like just two separate stories. Although I didn't feel vested in her at all, honestly. Exactly. So
well, I can totally see how somebody told the author at the end, like, you have to weave this character in. You can't just dump her in at the very end. So she goes back and she adds this storyline in through the, and it just has no relation to anything else or anybody else in the story. So I didn't like that. I found that was one of the things that made the page count really long and slowed the action down, because we're just sort of mired in her anxiety until things really start happening around 60 or 70% of the book. So.
I mean, because, honestly, just kind of how the Stellians kind of just appeared at some point, they could have technically made her just appear already in her, her new form, in her new way, and I'm here to help, I mean, technically she could have just dropped out of the sky and gave us a really quick, this is a prophecy and here I am.
I wouldn't have liked that either, but
it would have saved some pages.
I mean, yeah, like I say, I feel like the whole way the story ended, it's not to say that it was resolved, but the way that we added that other layer of stuff onto it caused a lot. It caused the length to drag out. It caused that angst for Akiva and Karu to drag out. It required that whole storyline of the of Eliza. I mean, without that storyline, you wouldn't have needed Eliza. I think there could have been something a little bit less overwrought at the end with the Stelians and say, here, we have this job. You're fucking it up with that thing you're doing. Let us teach you how to do it right. Without it becoming this, holy shit, the whole universe is about to end, and the only thing standing between us is Scarab and Eliza. Like,
the fabric of the universe.
Yes, of the all. So, yeah. I don't know. Like I say, I think it was a little ambitious to add that. Without that whole extra layer, I think it would have moved faster, and I would have been less like throwing it at the wall when I got to the end.
Yeah. I agree with you wholeheartedly. She could have handled that differently, and it would have been better for the story. But that's what we got. Which,
alternatively, just to because my editor brain is on, if she had dragged this out to 4 books, done less in book 3, and just had a different book about, the universe falling apart, monsters are about to come through, that would have worked better.
So in the war arc here, and then start a cliffhanger.
Yeah, so introduce the bruises in the sky, but don't make it a whole thing. Maybe introduce Eliza, but scale her back and give her more character depth. Introduce it and don't make it this whole big thing, because the other 20% of the ending is everybody just has to be happy, and everybody has to be happy, and everybody has to be happy, and everybody has to be happy, and then oh no, the world is ending again, and everybody has to be happy. Anyway, so if she had cut this into 2 books and done less in Dreams of Gods and Monsters and then done more about it in book 4, that would have worked perfectly. So it wouldn't have been so bogged down in this one book trying to get everything crammed in.
I kind of like that idea. You could do a lot with that. You could see how the new alliance with the Seraphim and all of the different arms of the Seraphim and the Chimera and the Stelians could come together.
Yeah. And actually that would have been a good ending, because she still could have had Akiva and Karu together, as the stuff is starting to happen, but then we still got the happy ending for everyone. And then she could or could not continue on. You can kind of leave us wondering about, well, what could that be? I don't think I would have been mad about it.
No. And I think a lot more authors need to realize that splitting one book into 2 is sometimes better. You don't need to cram everything into one plot line and be like, here's my one book with 5 different plot lines. It's too much. Splitting it into 2 books would have been better.
I agree. So here's, it's a tradition that I bring up J.R. Ward in every discussion, right? But she and people complain that she has so much going on in all her books, but she is really good at managing that ebb and flow of multiple threads throughout multiple books, right? So she'll start building up one storyline 2 books before it becomes the main storyline. And that's a lesson that could have been applied in this series, I think.
Yeah, I think to do that, though, she probably would have had to plot out a longer series, which in the end might have been better all around. I mean, all of these books could have been shortened a little bit and just plotted 4 or 5 books total to kind of just balance things instead of these huge books. But, and I think about Sarah J. Maas, her books are massive. They're fucking big. But I don't feel like it's drag on and on and on and on in her, at least for me.
So I think it's more common in fantasy to have the big chunky books, right?
Definitely.
Maybe you guys can tell me about, is it more common in YA to have the big chunky books?
No. Not usually.
Because there's a couple, but
I think it's a growing trend. But No, I don't think YA is that much longer. Like, I feel like this is out of the norm for the YA fantasy that I've read.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. So
Yeah, I don't know. I usually when I see books that are 600 pages, I kind of cringe. And it's like, it better be somebody that I'm familiar with or something I've already read, because, and it's almost, I'm glad this trilogy came to an end, because if she pulls, a Sarah J. Maas situation, it seems like every book she writes, her editor gives her the go ahead to just go longer and longer and longer, because each book gets longer and longer and longer. And so I feel like this is what would have happened with Laini Taylor. If she had wrote a fourth book, it would have been 750 pages.
Oh, God.
So
no, I do like the idea of making it a fourth book, to bring in more of the mythology about the layered worlds and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think about Razgut's role in this whole thing?
I thought it was really interesting. Like, he had to become the voice of the angels.
Mm-hmm.
And how I did like how the humans could kind of hear him, but were so wrapped up in the fact that, the angels are speaking in Latin. They're not. Anyway, no, I kind of liked that.
yeah, it was interesting.
I was a little surprised that he didn't more actively pursue Jael's downfall. Like, he thought about it a lot. There was a couple of scenes where he had this whole fantasy of making him do stupid things and tipping the humans off, and like he mentioned at one point, like he could have broken his neck really easily because he's sort of clinging onto his back, and I just kind of wondered why he didn't, so.
He must have needed, he was weird being on someone's back anyway, but I don't know.
I don't think he could have attached himself to anybody else afterward. In book 1, when his old man died, and he was just kind of left on the ground, I think that's what he feared, and he didn't want to be alone. He didn't want to be left.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he was dragging out the fantasy. Like, he could always do it later. He's a creature of great patience, right? So
yeah.
Well, I remember in book 1, I think it was, he was like begging Carew, like, let me help you. Let me, don't you want me? I feel like he might have needed somebody. He needed him for something. Just didn't.
Yeah. I again, with the sort of flat villains, right? This was the only bad guy that had a little depth and interest. And initially he was pretty repulsive, right? There was he knew things, but you couldn't really trust it because he was clearly, his mind was broken. So in retrospect, a wiser hero or heroine might have seen more potential in this being as an ally, but that's retrospect. I did like how he got a little bit more interesting in this third book. I think he had more things to say. A lot of it was sort of wrapped up in nonsense and craziness, which makes it harder to credit. But I don't know. I was hoping for a little bit happier ending for him.
So what was his ending? Because I definitely skimmed this section. I know Faith Grandma gets delivered to him or sees him.
Yeah, he's still stuck on Earth. The grandma, I don't know exactly how that happened, if Razgut made it happen, because Jael was already gone. And so she gets a call from the Vatican or the museum where they were staying, and she shows up thinking that she's going to have some conference with someone with power, and he jumps on her. So he doesn't require her permission, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that the world building around Razgut really holds up. Like, it kind of seems in the beginning like that whoever his mule is has to kind of agree to it, and they do it through like those fairy tale, be careful what you wish for kind of situation. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the JL only let him ride when he found it useful, right?
Okay.
So maybe humans are too weak to throw him off, but angels can do it. I don't know. We're probably spending more time on him than than he really deserves.
Yeah, he doesn't deserve anything, really.
No.
But, okay, so actually, I think this is a good time to take a quick break for our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll finish up our conversation and we'll give our ratings. Stay with us. Today's episode is sponsored in part by audiobooks.com. Audiobooks.com now has 175,000 titles and 1.2 million podcasts. New customers get 3 free audiobooks comprised of 1 premium credit and 2 VIP titles. Use our promo code SHELFADDICTION, spelled as one word, when you sign up at audiobooks.com. Again, our promo code is SHELFADDICTION. Welcome back, guys. Okay, let's finish up this conversation, talk about some highlights that we enjoyed a lot. Actually, I would love to talk about one of my favorite things in this whole entire series, and that was Susanna and Mick.
Yes!
I really, even through this book, I just really, whenever their scenes were up, I was like really tuned into those.
I agree. I love Susanna particularly, and Mick saves the day, really. When you think about it, if he hadn't rescued Eliza, they would have all been screwed in the end. So his cleverness really saved the day.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was clever a couple times over, like when he stole the wishes.
That's what I'm talking about, mostly, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, his music and the way he kind of brought some of the groups together with his violin, I loved that.
Their personalities, I think, just brought the most. They were like, they balanced all the sad stuff, I think.
They were humor. They were the humor relief and the human aspect of just like, what the fuck is happening? Because nobody else was human, even though Carew was kind of grew up human, but she had all her other memories. So they're the humans going, what the fuck? The way we all want to go, what the fuck is happening?
And I'm really glad for that, because one of the things I'm thinking about, like once the angels came to Earth, you know, we had Eliza's perspective, and we had the people in her office that she was watching the news with. But we really got zero other reaction other than sort of zoomed out newscast kind of discussion. We didn't get really an intimate perspective from anybody on Earth. So I did, even though it was a lot of pages, I did feel like that was a very deliberate exclusion, right? Like, can you imagine how long it would have been if there was like this third component that we were following, and they were, you know, going through or telling us what was going on Earth? Maybe like the scientists that found the pit, if we had like stayed with them a little while longer to see. I mean, I don't want that, but it did seem, you know, there was a point where I was like, you know, they're talking about the fate of the Earth here and humanity as well as Eretz, and we really most humans didn't know it. What I think is funny is that, you know, all of this happened over like 2 or 3 days, right? And then
they left after 72 hours,
right? So they just like came, showed up, talked to the Pope for a little while, and then went home. And like all this mass chaos breaks out on Earth. What happens after he goes home? Like,
there's still mass chaos because they still know about the monsters and the beasts, as they're calling them.
Maybe, but they didn't see any. They only saw the bodies, and I could see that being totally covered up.
It was a hoax or something.
Yeah, it was a hoax, and someone, you know, that it was all photoshopped, that it was all fake, and I think it would.
Yeah, they would try to calm the masses, but the scientists still know the people working on the DNA, Eliza's boss, he knows. So there would be people trying to work on it. And I think eventually they would try to go, because there was that scene with the billionaire who wanted to like fly his helicopter
follow into the
heaven.
yeah.
So some people would know and some people would remember, but
some people would know, and I think they would keep their mouth shut because I think the Men in Black would appear. They'd be like, "Hey, keep your mouth shut, or else."
Yeah.
It's all over the news that nope, we're not talking about it.
It'd be really interesting to see how long it took the hysteria to die down. And there would be new churches and new cults that would come up and wait for the third coming. Of the.
Oh my God! It'd be like this thing where they're like, "Remember that Angel Gate? What was that? Remember that? That was the biggest thing.
Where were you?
Where were you?"
Like, yeah. So I thought that was a fun thing to speculate about.
If it happened in 2020, it'd be like the killer bees. It'd be like, what happened to the killer bees? They just disappeared.
Oh no, they're still around. They're a couple counties away. So,
oh shit.
Yeah. They seem to be pretty well under control, but there've been a few more sightings.
Oh shit, they're back.
Yeah, so that's good times. But yeah, I want to talk for a minute about. I talked about the villains always being like pretty flat. They're something that I don't think we looked for as much 10 years ago, but there's a certain association with looks in this book that is a little bit doesn't hold up well, right? So why do we hate Rezgut? Well, because he's crippled and beat up and crazy. Okay, and why is JL evil? Well, because he's got a big scar on his face and he makes weird noises when he talks. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with the looksism and the
ableism.
And the ableism in this book.
I didn't even, I guess, make that connection right away. I guess we kind of did in book one. We were talking about kind of why the monsters are looking one way and the angels look another. But I just thought like Rezgut was evil. So I just thought evil. I didn't think, oh yeah, he is also crippled in this and that.
I kind of picture him as like a dried out apricot. So very like fruit and just gross.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So that was distressing to me a little bit. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up with you guys, like, tell me what you thought about the world building, because I feel a particular way, and I want to hear what you guys think. Just as a category of the writing, what do you think about it?
The first word that comes to my head is extensive.
I want to say ambitious.
Oh, that's a good one.
I think because I obviously first time I loved the world building. I had no problem with it first time around, but now I just think there's just too much going on. So she
has very much us versus them mentality going on, and you know, the good, clean, white angels who for the most part are very white and clean, except for the misbegotten, which are, you know, tattooing black marks all up and down their arms, so they're turning darker and they're shunned by the rest of the angels. And then,
well, even Esther at some point, you know, when she was having that argument with her boss, she was like, oh, you never saw who thinks of a black angel, right? She even says that.
Yeah.
So,
yep. So here's what I think about the world building. I think it's very superficial, right? So when we find out, like, how does the resurrection thing work, right? Well, so there's the gleaning the souls on the one side, and then there's the creating the new bodies on the other. And at some point, I really don't understand how a necklace turns into a body, right?
Magic.
Yeah.
And pain.
And I just feel like it's really superficial and hand wavy. And
I think that's also a product of it being YA. Like, I feel like if this was adult, we might have got the full on, at least one time, of seeing the start to finish of, you know, how this process works, how the spell works, or whatever. How is the pain, you know, how does the pain work? I think that would have helped it be more believable or whatever, and not so wonky. But I think because of the horror or gore maybe involved in doing something like that, instead of going full on into it because it's YA, she just kind of was like, wave the wand, there you go, teeth, bam, there we go. I don't know.
Yeah, and here's the other thing is the teeth. Like, she's got thousands and thousands of souls to resurrect. Is she going to steal teeth from Earth to do all that? How is that? You know, so I just, like, were there no teeth in Eretz? I mean, people die, right? Beings die. So it was very, like, beyond the first half of the first book, I really wanted to understand that more. So that was
a major story. I mean, that was what Karuk did. That was her thing.
Well, right. And it talked a little bit about how, what was her mentor's name? I'm forgetting it right now.
Brimstone?
Brimstone was the only one that could do it. The only one. And then she came along and she could kind of do a little of it. She had a little bit of a talent for it. But he was like the only one in their whole race that could do it, right? And then towards the end of this third book, Zuzana is like, well, I could do some of it. I can do this part. I'll help. I'll be one too. You know, it's like, well, you know, I don't know. So I was not overly impressed by the world building. I felt like it got its depth or its texture from the books. Got their texture from the emotional side, from the longing and the yearning between
angst.
There's so much angst between Karu and Akiva and their star-crossed situation. They even brought up Romeo and Juliet in the second book, and you know, it kind of is Romeo and Juliet with a happier ending after the not so happy ending, and after like 5 less happy endings.
Oh my god! So speaking of ending, like why did they break the wishbone at the end? Like, why?
Is that their thing?
Nostalgia's sake?
Yeah, I think it was a callback to the Madrigal and Akiva days in the Grove.
That's dumb. I'm sorry.
They always snapped wishbones, right? Wasn't that their thing?
It was their thing before
she died.
Before Madrigal was killed, but not like kind of on the page for the rest of the books, because they never really hooked up through the meat of the 3 books till the very. I mean, it's YA, right?
They did in the other body, before she was Karu. They
flashback.
did, yeah. Although we never see it, we just hear about it. Their month together or whatever. Which is, I think that's why I almost feel like, I hate to say it, but this series, the trilogy, actually could have been better as adult fiction fantasy versus young adult fantasy, because yes, a little sex would have made the yearning. You know what I'm saying? It would have paid off for a little bit. Okay, and it wouldn't have felt so angsty because there would have been a payoff. Okay,
a little bit of cake.
Even if it was, you know, not all over the place, but a couple places, you know, far and in between. Okay. We could have gotten a little bit more gory and into it with some of the spells and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the number of near misses got kind of ridiculous at a certain point for me. So
is it invisible or invincible to death?
Invisible.
It was definitely skimming.
Invisible.
I was like, I know there's an I word. Invisible.
Yeah. So that was what his mother said, I think, about him. And
what about that plot line? Did anybody else have a problem with that?
Oh, you mean the fact that we don't actually know why she showed up or how it happened or what? I mean,
she just heard the fate of her son and then decided to get caught and raped and have this baby for this. What the fuck? That's all I have to say about that is what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a Mary Magdalene thing? I don't know.
No.
Not exactly, maybe, but
That's weird.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, because we through the first 2.5 books, we just assumed that she was like a prisoner of war, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we realized, well, these beings don't get taken prisoner unless they want to. Like 2 of them defeated the entire angel army, right?
Mm-hmm. And they can turn invisible,
right? So yeah.
So why do that? Like, why? I mean, other than like, oh, I have to fulfill what I've
this
seen.
Well,
destiny.
that's why. So
That's why. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
I don't know.
I cannot appreciate this.
No.
It's kind of cringy.
Yeah.
It's kind of cringy.
It's kind of cringy. It's kind of cringy. Anyway, I think if you love angsty YA fantasy, this is the series for you.
I loved it back in the day
when you were a young adult.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, to be fair, I was an adult then, but I was not as young as Casey, obviously. But I don't know.
I think the genre was a little newer, 10 years. I'm saying 10 years. Is that about right? I think.
Well, this last book
2014.
Okay,
so 6 years ago.
6 years ago for the latest book.
Right.
I just kind of think that at the time, this felt new. It felt different from the things I was reading at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was it more than anything. And of course, I liked the characters for the most part.
And a fresh concept is golden in fantasy, which this really is.
Yeah. But I do feel like if you like YA fantasy, you should definitely give it a try. Mm-hmm. You know, if nothing else, you'll like the first and second book probably more than the third. Or you might like all of it, like I did the first time around.
Yeah. If it's your first time, you might enjoy all of it.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Okay, so should we go ahead and rate Dreams of Gods and Monsters?
Yes.
Let's rate
Let's
it.
do it.
Casey, would you like to start?
Of course.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm torn between 2 and 3 stars, and the 3 stars is purely nostalgia. I enjoyed it so much the first time, and I had such fond memories, and I was so excited to read it. And then I could not read it. Mm-hmm. And again, I know I've said this so many times, I just don't know if it's 2020, if it's this book, if it's me, what. But no, I skimmed through more than half of this book in the past couple days because I just could not bring myself to read it. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll go with 2 stars because I'm just not in a good headspace right now.
Okay.
Leave it at that.
Okay. Nicola, what about you?
I do think before starting this series, you have to think pretty hard about what your tolerance for apocalyptic fiction is in 2020. I always hate to give something below a 3 in a genre that is not my genre because I don't feel like that's fair. Like if I come into a murder mystery genre and I know I don't like that and I'm reading it because somebody made me read it, my enjoyment is like at a 2, 1.5 or a 2, but that doesn't mean that the book is a 2, mm-hmm. right? So I don't want to go less than a 3 because this just isn't really my genre. From my enjoyment, I didn't love the book. I would probably just say, personally, it's closer to a 2. But from the perspective of the book, it is a very epic conclusion. It is very involved and layered and twisty and angsty. And if that's the kind of stuff you love, then this is the book for you.
Yeah. I would give it a solid 3. I still enjoyed the characters. I overall still enjoyed the story. It just felt slower to me this time around. It felt more bogged down in some ways than it needed to be. And this is versus, I just looked it up. I gave it a 5 when I read it in 2014. And I'm shocked I gave it that. But I mean, obviously, I was in a different place in 2014 versus today. So, you know, just the overall fact that I like the trilogy overall, blended with some nostalgia, it gets a solid 3. So that's that. Right. I don't know. Look, the shrug emoji. I don't know. So you guys, let us know what you rated Dreams of Gods and Monsters. And if by chance you're also on a reread, did it hold up for you? I want to know.
Yes. Tell us.
Yes. Okay. So we are done for today, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And we will see you next month. Happy reading, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review, or like this episode on your favorite podcast player. It seems so simple, but it really helps me out. You can share this podcast with other book nerd friends or on your favorite social media space. You can also join the Shelf Addiction Patreon family. For as little as $2 a month, you will help us produce even more awesome content for your ears. You can also consider joining the Shelf Addiction Official Facebook group, where we talk all things bookish and more in a safe space. The Shelf Addiction Podcast is a part of the Nerdy Maven Network. You can also reach us via email at info@shelfaddiction.com. Thank you for listening.